Hi, welcome to this brief overview of plant identification. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at different plant families that host key indicator species for the acre scoring system. What I'd like you to be able to do is to be able to identify the key characteristics of those plant families. That will make identification of the species much easier for you. So for example, here on the left-hand side we have the orchid family, next to that we have the pea family, next to that we have the daisy family, and then next to that we have the figwort family. Each of these flowers looks very different from each other, but they're all made of plant parts that are just slightly modified. And that's morphology, so the way something looks. The way something looks, or a plant looks, we're going to be looking at leaves, stems, flower. Those are the main characteristics that we'd be looking at in the plant that help us identify it. So for example, up there in the top right hand corner, you'd easily be able to identify the cabbage family from that very complicated looking bee orchid plant. On the left of the bee orchid we have bog asphodel. Bog asphodel is very much associated with acidic ground. Habitat can be a good assistance with indication of plant species. And the last two pictures there are pictures of different types of leaf shape. So leaf shape being extremely important for some plants to distinguish them from each other. On the top left there we have a member of the bedstraw family, and at the bottom we have a member of the violet family. So very characteristic plant or leaf shape that they have in those particular families. Just a reminder of parts of the flower. I know you'll have remembered this from biology, but your flower is held on something called a pedicel. So it's just the stalk that holds the flower. And then you have your sepals, which are the green parts, your petals, which can be coloured and may not be coloured. Then you've got your stamen, which is made up of your anther and your filament, your anther being the part that produces the pollen. And you've got your female part, the pistil, the stigma, the style, and the ovary. And the stigma is, of course, where the pollen grains fall, and they come down there into the ovary to form the seeds to go forward for the new plant that will hopefully grow next year. Just looking at each one of those characteristics in turn, very simply, we've got something like a buttercup. When you turn over the back of the buttercup, there are 5 sepals that are unfused, so they're what's called simple sepals. But if you look at something like the pea family, they have 5 sepals as well, but they're actually fused together into a little tube. So things get more complicated in certain plant families. Again, coming back to our buttercup, if you turn it back over and you're facing the flower, each one of those petals is free. They're not joined together, so you could pluck them out and none of them are attached to each other. Whereas something like the dead nettle family, so the Scropulariaceae there, they have flowers which also have 5 petals, but they're fused together. So just a close-up here on the right-hand side, the top or the hood of the flower has 2 petals that are joined together. The 2 side petals are also joined to the main body of the flowers, but they look slightly freer. And then the bottom flower, or the bottom petal, is 1 petal, but it's kind of notched into 2 lips. And this is all to do with attracting in pollinators, different ways that plants have of trying to attract in something that's going to spread the pollen to the next plant. And the flower shape, so this dead nettle flower here is what's called a labiate, so got lips on it, 2 lips there at the bottom. Something like a primrose is a regular flower. It doesn't really have any distinguishing features. The devil's bit scabious there to the left of the primrose, it's what's called a capitulum, so it's got a lot of flowers together in one compact head. Underneath that we have the cruciform or cross-like flowers of the cabbage family. And to the right of that we have the very characteristic pea-like flower, which has 5 petals as well, all joined in a very characteristic way. So flower shape will be something we concentrate on over the next few weeks in terms of different plant families and indeed different species and how they appear in their flower shape. The way the flower is held along the stalk is also quite important for plant identification. The next plant family, or the plant family you'll be looking at next, is going to be the daisy family, and they have very characteristic plant family inflorescence type called a capitulum. So it's a compact head of flowers. Compare that to something with the carrot family, and they have very characteristic umbel shape. So each plant family will tend to hold its plants in a different way on the stalks. And another thing to think about is what's called the planes of division, so regular or irregular flower shape. Now, you have to kind of believe me when I say this, but the pea family there, if you were to draw a line and think about how can I get a mirror image of the flower, there's only one plane of division where you can fold the flower over and get the same structure or shape. So that's called an irregular flower or a zygomorphic flower. Then we've got our marsh marigold here on the other side. And again, while it's not quite being complete mirror images, it's easier to see this as being more regular in shape. So I call this pieces of the pie. If you cut this up, you more or less get the same piece of pie as somebody else is going to get if you cut that flower up. And that's a regular flower. Something we'll look at with the different plant families is, are sepals and petals both present and clearly distinguished from each other? Or if I can't see both sepals and petals, so the green part, the coloured part, am I looking at something that just looks like petals or just looks like sepals? And in some plants, they've actually gotten rid of the flowers altogether and they just concentrate on either the male or female parts or both. So a few different words. Calyx is another word for sepal. Corolla is another word for petal. You'll come across both of those terms. And perianth is the word that's used when you can't tell whether it's sepals or petals and they can't be distinguished from each other. Leaves can also be very useful as plant identification indicators. And indeed, you know that you won't always be able to guarantee a flower's presence, so you will have to look at the vegetative parts of the plant. So in other words, what the leaf looks like to help you identify the plant. Something like on the left-hand side here would be a kind of plant that's, or a leaf that's similar to lords and ladies. So you would have an entire leaf, it's called, but it's got a very characteristic heart shape to it. In the middle here, we have something like, you would find, I can't remember, the Conanum palustris. I think it's the marsh cinquefoil, that's it, that's on your list. And that has something that's called a palmate leaf, so it looks like 5 fingers radiating out. And then on the right-hand side, you have a pea flower, a trifoliate leaf. So again, leaves can be very characteristic of different plant families and different plants. So for example, here is the entire leaf that you would find if you're looking for devil's bit scabious. They tend to occur in quite dense bunches when they do occur, and at certain stages they get these characteristic sort of leaf blotches on them as well. And then we have other leaves that you might look for in your meadows or your grasslands. Here's the heart-shaped leaf of the marsh marigold. You can easily distinguish that from the palmate leaf of the lady's mantle, which is again easily distinguishable from the kind of rounded leaf with these little outspurts or outgrowths at the end called auricles of the common sorrel, versus something that looks like this kind of very fuzzy shaped leaf of the hawkweed. So this would be cat's ear. So each one of these will be very characteristic of different plants. And again, we'll look at those in the lectures over the next while, and also when we get out on site to look at them in reality. So now